Good evening, everyone, and today we're going to have some more horror stories with me, America, or as a very clever subscriber pointed out, American Horror Stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some scary stories. First out is The Town with No Name from the subreddit Short Scary Stories by the user RockPaperCynic. All three of us were silent as we drove past the blank welcome to sign and into the town with no name. The people all watched us with the same slack expression, their heads tilted at identical angles as if to listening to a single far-off sound. For a moment, I heard it too. For a moment, the people in the car seemed like strangers, and I couldn't remember who we were or where we were going. But then we passed the lost house and it all came back to me. We were all old friends, all traveling together, all safe. All four of us. Our second horror story is called Grandma's Shiny Pennies in My Pockets for Luck. And it's from the subreddit Short Scary Stories, written by the user HackShuck. On every special day when I was growing up, my grandma would always place a few shiny pennies inside my coat pockets, for luck. It's an English tradition, I think. Every birthday or clarinet recital or Saint's Day parade, my mom would send me to my grandma's house, so grandma could drop the coins into my pockets. They weren't worth more than maybe a comic book, but the kindly gesture always added to the excitement of the important events in my young life. Sadly, grandma passed away when I was 8, but to my surprise, I still found those pennies inside my pockets on every special occasion. I never told my mom. I figured that grandma was still giving me her blessings from heaven, and I wanted it to be mine and grandma's secret. Grandma was a secretive sort of person, who spoke in odd homilies like, "A stitch in time saves 9. And she'd wink and I'd know that everything would always be alright. Of course, as I grew older, I suspected that it was my mom who was secretly slipping me the pennies, as she knew how dearly I'd loved my grandma. But then my mom died suddenly when I was 17, and the pennies continued to appear. I found pennies when I passed my driving test, and when I started my first job. These pennies helped me through a tough time, as all I'd ever had was my mom and grandma, as girls against the world. But then, when I met Jake, the pennies suddenly stopped. Every big day passed by, from our first date to our wedding day, with none of grandma's pennies to mark the occasion. I became tearful on the night Jake proposed, whilst we sat in his car eating drive-thru. So Jake asked me what the fuck I was crying about. I told him about grandma's pennies, and he laughed his ass off, suggesting that the dead old soul must need all her pennies, as there ain't no pension in hell. I was inconsolable, so desperate I felt to receive grandma's blessing. On the big day, I wore a jacket with pockets, in case grandma decided to put some pennies inside, over my smartest blouse, as Jake had refused to waste good money on a wedding dress. I cried the entire bus ride to the chapel. "Oh, Grandma," I sobbed, "please see the good in Jake. He'll provide for me. As soon as his death metal band gets signed by Sony Music or EMI." But still my pockets were empty. Jake seemed badly hungover on that day. He staggered, bloated and sputtering, down the aisle, and choked as he was supposed to say, "I do." He clutched his throat, turning purple, and, to everyone's shock, coughed up a volcano of shiny pennies. His body jangled as if stuffed full of loose change as he fell down dead, a penny over each eye. And amidst the screams and the panics, I noticed a single shiny penny somehow land right inside my pocket, for luck. Our third story is actually not a horror story, but a creepypasta called The Expressionless and written by Ivy Sir. In June 1972, a woman appeared in the Cedars-Sinai hospital in nothing but a white, blood-covered gown. Now this in itself should not be too surprising, as people often have accidents nearby and come to the nearest hospital for medical attention. But there were two things who caused people who saw her to vomit and flee in terror. The first being that she wasn't exactly human. She resembled something close to a mannequin, but had the dexterity and fluidity of a normal human being. Her face was as flawless as a mannequin's, devoid of eyebrows and smeared in makeup. There was a kitten clamped in her jaws, so unnaturally tight that no teeth could be seen, and the blood was still squirting out over her gown and onto the floor. She then pulled it out of her mouth, tossed it aside, and collapsed. From the moment she stepped through the entrance to when she was taken to a hospital room and cleaned up before being prepped for sedation, she was completely calm, expressionless and motionless. The doctors thought it best to restrain her until the authorities could arrive, and she did not protest. They were unable to get any kind of response from her, and most staff members felt too uncomfortable to look directly at her for more than a few seconds. But the second the staff tried to sedate her, she fought back with extreme force. Two members of staff had to hold her down as her body rose up on the bed with the same blank expression. She turned her emotionless eyes towards the male doctor and did something unusual. She smiled. As she did, the female doctor screamed and let go out of shock. In the woman's mouth were not human teeth, but long, sharp spikes, too long for her mouth to close fully without causing any damage. The male doctor stared back at her for a moment before asking, "What in the hell are you?" She cracked her neck down to her shoulder to observe him, still smiling. There was a long pause. The security had been alerted and could be heard coming down the hallway. As he heard them approach, she darted forward, sinking her teeth into the front of his throat, ripping out his jugular and letting him fall to the floor, gasping for air as he choked on his own blood. She stood up and leaned over him, her face coming dangerously close to his as the life faded from his eyes. She leaned closer and whispered in his ear, "I am God." The doctor's eyes filled with fear as he watched her calmly walk away to greet the security men. His last ever sight would be watching her feast on them one by one. The female doctor who survived the incident named her the Expressionless. There was never a sighting of her ever again. Well, that's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have anything else you would like me to read, feel free to post it in the comments or on my Facebook page. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.